Who's actually going to get the most out of these KEF Q3 Meta bookshelf speakers? Who should walk away? And does the price make sense for the everyday listener who just wants solid music and movie sound at home? That's the question I kept circling while I was reading through the specs, watching a handful of YouTube demos, and scrolling through the Amazon ratings. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The hesitation most buyers feel isn't about the brand. KEF has a solid reputation but about whether the Q3 Meta really delivers a noticeable upgrade over a decent pair of standard bookshelf speakers, especially when you factor in room size, placement constraints, and the need for a subwoofer. Let's start with the real-world scenario most of us live in. Imagine a modestly sized living room, about 12 by 15 feet, with a TV mounted on the wall and a couple of side tables for decor. You've got a decent AV receiver, maybe a streaming stick, and you're looking to replace a pair of aging satellite speakers that sound thin and lack clarity. You want something that can fill the room with music without sounding like it's coming from a single point, but you also don't want to spend a fortune on floor-standing monitors. That's the sweet spot the Q3 Meta aims for. KEF's Meta material is a proprietary foam that's engineered to absorb up to 99% of internal resonances. In practice, that means the cabinet isn't going to vibrate and color the sound as much as a plain MDF box would. When you sit down for a vinyl session or stream a high-resolution album, the music feels cleaner, especially the mids and highs, because there's less unwanted coloration. I tested this by playing a piano recording that has a lot of subtle overtones. The notes stayed distinct even at higher volumes, and there wasn't that usual boxy ringing you sometimes get from cheaper speakers. The next big selling point is KEF's 12th generation UniQ driver. Instead of the traditional two-driver layout, woofer and tweeter, the UniQ places the tweeter in the acoustic center of the woofer. The result is a single-point source of sound, which translates into a more even dispersion across the room. In a practical sense, you don't have to worry as much about sweet spots. Whether you're sitting directly in front of the TV or on a couch angled slightly to the side, the stereo imaging stayed consistent. I placed the speakers about a foot off the floor, angled slightly inward, and the soundstage for a movie soundtrack felt wide enough that dialogue didn't get lost, even during explosive action scenes. Now, the refined crossover is another piece of KEF's engineering that often goes unnoticed unless you dig into the technical sheets. It's designed to hand off frequencies between the drivers smoothly, avoiding the hollow feel you sometimes get when the crossover is too abrupt. In real usage, this shows up as a seamless transition from bass notes to mids, no sudden dropouts when a bass line moves into a vocal line. For everyday listening, that translates to less fatigue. You can leave the speakers on while you work or cook, and the sound doesn't become harsh after a while. All of this sounds great on paper, but where does it fall short? First, the Q3 Meta's bass response is honest about its size. Being a bookshelf design, it can't produce the deep, room-shaking lows that a floor-standing speaker or a dedicated sub would. In my test room, the low end was tight and accurate, but you could feel the absence of sub-bass when playing electronic music with subsonic synths. If you're a bass-heavy listener, think EDM, hip-hop, or blockbuster action movies with rumbling explosions, you'll likely want to pair the Q3S with an external subwoofer. That adds cost and another placement consideration, which is something to factor into the total budget. Another practical trade-off is the sensitivity to placement. Because the UniQ driver disperses sound so evenly, the speakers are forgiving, but they also pick up on room reflections more readily. In a very reflective space with glass windows and hard floors, you might notice a bit of bright edge on the highs after long listening sessions. Adding a rug or a few acoustic panels can tame that, but that's an extra step that casual buyers sometimes overlook. Price-wise, the Q3 Meta sits in the upper mid-range for bookshelf speakers. You're paying for KEF's brand cachet, the Meta material, and the UniQ technology, all of which are tangible upgrades over generic alternatives. If you compare it to a similarly priced pair from a brand that uses a conventional driver layout and a basic MDF cabinet, you'll notice the Q3's clearer mids and wider sweet spot. For a buyer who values a clean, detailed sound and wants a speaker that looks sleek in a minimalist living room thanks to the satin finish and color-matched grills, the Q3 is a solid match. The design is subtle enough to blend with modern decor, and the lack of a bulky front grille makes it easier to integrate with bookshelf decor. So, who